So I want us to imagine together the situation of an archer shooting at a target. Okay, an archer shooting at a target. And let's imagine a very expert archer. So when an expert archer pulls back the bow and aims at a target, we might think that the best case scenario is the arrow traveling right at the bullseye. Right? But in archery, often arrows can be affected by luck. So in our imagined situation, the archer pulls back the arrow, and then a gust of wind comes from the right, and it blows the arrow off course. So you might think at this point, the archer being very upset and sighing and saying, "Oh, how unlucky. Given that the gust of wind came, the arrow's probably going to miss the target altogether now." But then, at the last moment, another gust of wind comes, this time from the left, and blows the arrow back on course. And the combined effect of these two gusts of wind is to leave the arrow right back on the target where it hits the bullseye. Now, what would you say about a case like that? The archer shoots skillfully, and she's successful in hitting the bullseye. But does she succeed because of skill? Or does she succeed because of luck? Now, most people would actually say in this situation, the archer succeeds because of luck. And that's because of the intervening gusts. And when philosophers who think about this distinction have written about it, they've given this archery case as a situation in which we have an archetypical example, a most obvious example of someone succeeding because of luck. Okay, so let's think about poker now. Oh, here's my gusts. Great. Thank you. Okay, so let's think about poker now. Okay, so how many people here have played Texas Hold'em? Oh, wow. Okay, so like 50% of you guys have. Okay, so that was Annie Duke. Annie Duke. She's a professional Texas Hold'em player. I'm about to describe to you an actual hand that she played. Okay? So in Texas Hold'em, everyone gets their own hands, their own cards, but then 5 cards are dealt in the center of the table, and these are community cards that go into everyone's hand. So in this particular hand, after the first 3 cards were dealt in the center of the table, Annie's opponent went all in. Okay, so he bet all of his chips. And at this point, Annie's hand was rather weak, right? So if she was a novice, she would just immediately fold. If you're playing poker and someone goes all in and your hand isn't very strong, usually you just fold. But Annie's an expert, and she had picked up on subtle cues from her opponent's body language and from his betting pattern. And she had come to believe that he was actually bluffing, so she called the bet. And when they turned over their cards, it turned out that she was right? Her hand was much stronger than his because he was bluffing. And here was the situation. With 2 cards remaining, the only way for her opponent to win is for the king of spades to appear. Okay? So that gave her a pretty good chance of winning the hand. But her situation was even better than that. Even if the king of spades appeared, if the other card was an ace, then she would win anyways. Right? So she wins if there's no king of spades or if there's an ace. Okay? And that puts her in a really strong position. She had a 95% chance of winning. Okay, so let's imagine one way that this hand may end up. We could imagine that the first card to be revealed is a 2, and then we could imagine that the next card is a 3. So in this situation, most people are quick to say that Annie won the hand because of skill, right? Whereas a novice would have folded, Annie picked up on the fact that he was bluffing. She made a very skillful call, and that led to the winning of the hand. Okay, but that's not actually what happened. Okay, let's look at what actually happened. So in actuality, the first card to be revealed was the king of spades. How unlucky. Given that this card is the king of spades, Annie can only win if the last card is an ace. And that's only going to happen 7% of the time. So no, it's very unlikely that she'll win the hand. But then the last card actually turned out to be the ace, right? And she jumped for joy. And everyone watching couldn't believe it. Now, what would you say about a case like this? Again, Annie acted skillfully, and she was successful in winning the hand. But did she succeed because of skill or because of luck? Now, most people say in this situation that Annie succeeded because of luck. And the curious thing is, if you ask a poker professional about this hand, they'll tell you that you're making a terrible mistake. So in order to see why that is, you have to start thinking like a poker pro. And in order to think like a poker pro, you have to think like a computer. So you might imagine a huge table of all the possible two-card combinations. Now, if I were to show you an actual table of all the possible two-card combinations in this situation, it'd be much bigger than this. There'd actually be thousands of possibilities to consider. And even if I used teeny tiny text to represent each card, there'd still be a ton of text up there. So the reason I'm telling you this is because I want to warn you, because I actually did that. Okay, so here's a representation of all the possibilities that could possibly happen in this hand. So you may notice that some of the text up there is red. You see little red dots. Those are possibilities in which Annie loses the hand. Okay, those are possibilities in which the king of spades appears and an ace doesn't. Right? And the white text represents situations in which Annie would win. Those are all the winning combinations for her. Now, visualizing the possibilities in this way may give you a better idea of what it means to say that Annie had a 95% chance of winning the hand after she called. It means that 95% of the possibilities at that point were such that she would win the hand, right, as represented by this table. Okay, so let's zoom in on just one section of this huge table. So we see here KSKD in red. So what that means is the king of spades and the king of diamonds. Okay, that's that possibility. And it's in red because that's a situation in which Annie loses the hand. Okay? And you also see in red 5HKS, and that means the five of hearts and the king of spades. Again, that would be a situation in which Annie loses. But then all the other situations up there are white. Those are all winners for Annie. So do you notice a special situation in white up there? In the top row, right in the center? Okay, KSAD, that's the king of spades, the ace of diamonds. That's the situation that actually happened. Now, as human beings, we tend to think that certain of these possibilities, of the white possibilities, are lucky possibilities. And we tend to think that others are just normal possibilities. But a computer wouldn't see any of that. Part of the reason that we think certain possibilities are lucky is because we experience the world in a certain way. We experience it through time. So for us, we just don't see the result of the hand immediately. We see one card at a time. And that makes it seem to us that at one point, there's a very low chance of Annie succeeding, and then at another point, there's a really good chance of her succeeding. But again, a computer wouldn't see that. To a computer, all these possibilities are just ways that Annie could win the hand, and they're all equally probable. And so it wouldn't understand that some of these are lucky and some of these are just normal. Okay, to show you that the computer has it right and we're making a mistake, I want you to consider the following situation. Instead of seeing one card at a time, imagine that both cards are flipped over at the same time. Okay, so Annie makes her call, and then we just see what the result was. She wins, there's an ace. In that situation, most people say that Annie won the hand because of skill. Okay, even better. Imagine a situation in which the first card is the ace of diamonds. Okay, given that the first card is the ace of diamonds, the hand is over. Annie wins immediately. There's no way for her to lose. And then we see what the last card was, and it turned out to be the king of spades. In that situation, everybody says that Annie won because of skill. But how could the order of the cards, or the way in which the cards are revealed, possibly influence whether Annie wins because of luck or because of skill? Remember that after she makes the call, she has no more influence over the hand, and neither does her opponent. All that's left is to see which one of those possibilities is randomly selected. So how could the way that the possibility is revealed to us change whether she wins because of luck? And I think when you see that, you see that we are making a mistake. If we think that Annie wins because of skill when both cards are flipped over simultaneously, or when the ace appears first, then we must also think that she wins because of skill when the ace appears second. So philosophers have noted other areas in which we may be making mistakes about luck. So here's a man who was injured when a buildup of gas in the sewer underneath his house caused an explosion that destroyed his house and critically injured him. Now you can imagine someone telling a man like this, "You're extremely lucky to be alive." But you might think, on reflection, if you thought about it, maybe this person is extremely unlucky to be injured in the freak explosion. But then you might think, well, maybe it doesn't matter, right? Maybe it doesn't matter what we say here. Maybe we just say people like this are lucky to cheer them up. Maybe we say it to find something positive in an otherwise really bad situation. And so maybe in the end it doesn't really matter. But when it comes to the distinction between succeeding because of luck and succeeding because of skill, it does matter. Whether other people think that you've succeeded because of luck can make the difference between whether they offer you a job, or whether you make a team, or whether you win an award. And whether you think that you've succeeded because of luck or because of skill can have a huge impact on your self-esteem. So it does make a big difference. Now, when I first started thinking about this topic, I tried to think of areas in my life that maybe I was making the mistake we saw in the poker example. Now, I used to play soccer competitively, and my position was striker. And so one of my duties for the teams that I played on was to take penalty kicks. Now, my goal in taking penalty kicks was to try and take luck out of the equation to the greatest extent possible. And my strategy for doing that was to do the exact same thing every time. Okay, so this is what I'd do. I would kind of look at the left corner of the goal like I was going to kick it that way as I ran up to the ball, and at the last moment I'd turn and kick it in the right corner. Okay? And I practiced doing that exact same movement over and over again. And out of the 112 penalty kicks that I took during my career, I scored 110 of them. So that's a good percentage for soccer. Thank you. Well, let me tell you about cricket now. So even though I was pretty good at this, I can tell you that after I kicked the ball, I couldn't be certain exactly where the ball was going. I knew that the ball was going to end up somewhere in that region, but other than that, it was completely up to chance where it ended up. Now, here's what I used to think. I used to think that sometimes I scored because of skill. So when the ball ended up here, right in the center of the corner of the goal, I thought, I've scored because of skill. But sometimes, twice, the ball ended up so far to the right of where it could be that it hit off the post and went in the goal. And when that happened, I thought that I scored because of luck. And the goalkeeper thought that I scored because of luck. That actually happened twice to me. But I now think that maybe that was a mistake. If that oval really does describe the possible places that the ball could end up, and it's just up to chance where inside that oval the ball ends up, well, then maybe you should think that no matter where it ends up, I scored because of skill. Even the 2% of the time that the ball went so far to the right that it hit off the post and went in, maybe even then I scored because of skill. Now, you can imagine a different type of penalty taker. Someone who, given the way that they kick the ball, it's going to end up somewhere in that region. Now, imagine that person kicks the ball and it travels in exactly the same way. Right? It goes way to the right, it hits off the post, and then it goes in the goal. Well, if that describes the possible places that the ball could end up, given the way that they kicked it, then that person does succeed because of luck, right? 95% of the time, they're going to miss the goal completely. Only 5% of the time is it going to be so far to the left that it hits the post and goes in. And we can imagine a situation in between, a situation where someone's okay at taking penalty kicks. 50% of the time, it misses the goal. 50% of the time, it goes in the goal. And again, imagine that they kick the ball in the exact same way. It travels to the right, it hits the post, and goes in the goal. Well, this person also succeeds because of luck, it seems. They're less lucky, but because 50% of the time they would miss the goal, they're still lucky. Now, the really interesting thing is this. Imagine that they kick the ball and it just goes right into the goal, seemingly very safe. Even then, they succeed because of luck. Why? Because 50% of the time they would miss the goal. And this was just one of those times, one of the few 5% of the times that the ball would go so far to the left that it would just look like it was a sure thing. So the upshot is that just by observing what happens, you can't tell whether someone succeeds because of luck or because of skill. You need to know what were the probabilities of success when they acted. What did that look like? And yet, if you watch soccer on television, right, you'll see this mistake being made over and over again. The commentators will assume that because the ball hit the post, we know that the goal was scored because of luck. And they'll assume that because the ball went safely into the side of the goal, that goal was scored because of skill. But there's no way to tell that just by seeing what happens. So let's go back to our archer. Remember, we're dealing with a very skilled expert archer here. So we might think that when she aims and shoots, there's a very high chance of the arrow hitting the target. And again, a gust of wind comes from the right, and it knocks the arrow off course, and then another gust of wind comes from the left and corrects for the first. Well, I think even here we may be making a mistake. We could think of the first gust as like the king of spades. It's a very unlikely event that makes it unlikely that she'll succeed. Maybe the chance of that gust was very low, 5%, just like the king of spades. And maybe the second gust is just like the ace of diamonds. Maybe it had a 7% chance that corrects from the first. So I think even here, if those really are the probabilities of all these events happening, then we're making the exact same mistake that we saw in the poker case, and maybe the archer does succeed because of skill. So I'd ask you, the next time you find yourself thinking that you've succeeded because of luck, ask yourself, what were the probabilities of success when I acted? Did I act skillfully? And if you do that, you just might find that maybe you're not quite as lucky as you thought. Thank you.